Hi, this is MACROLEV and I'm going to show you how I made I Like It Like That. It's a B-side track from my latest EP called In Your Heart. It's out now exclusively on Beatport, so feel free to go and check it out. But now let's jump into this. So usually, most of the time, I start with kick to lay the foundation. This is how it sounds. 2 layers, bottom layer made in Serum. This is pretty much the kick I use all the time. This is just like fundamental frequency, and yeah, it's very simple to make. You just route sine wave oscillator onto an envelope. In this case I'm using LFO1 in envelope mode to trigger the pitch. Then add a top layer on that. With a high pass you can use any like kick sample, anything like that. So usually I make 2 layers and I would group them, call it kick, and I would process it all together, just like EQ it a little bit, get rid of that nastiness in the mid-range, and then add a little bit of low end. And then I would process it with something like saturation. Have a listen how much the sound is changing by adding this. That's without, and this is with it. It's very simple as well. Just throw this Saturn in, crank up the drive to about 80%, and then mix to about 50%. So it's like 50% dry signal, 50% wet signal. Then when to add a bass line. Here's the notes for the bass line. Again, made it in Serum. This is a bit interesting though. So it contains 3 oscillators, and each of the oscillators is in a different pitch. So it's almost like a chord. So sine wave oscillator is -1 octave. Sawtooth wave is 0 octave. So this is 1 octave above the sine wave. And then another sine wave on top of that is +7 semitones. So it's almost like a chord. So if you get rid of one of the oscillators, dramatic change in the sound. Have a listen. Yeah, just to make that sub bass a little bit fuller, a little bit more harmonics to it. So the next thing is couple layers of some like low end bassy kind of synth. I think this is only a preset. Yeah, it's a preset. Here's the notes, by the way. Very simple, nothing too fancy. What's more interesting about this is that I've used 2 delay plugins. One just like normal 1/4 of delay on 20% dry wet, and the other one is in ping pong, and it's constantly evolving throughout the course of the track. So I've mapped this LFO to dry wet, and LFO is set to random waveform here, and then it just randomizes the dry wet signal throughout the sound. There's another sound like this here. I've freezed it, but it's a preset and it's processed pretty much the same. a little bit of filtering and EQing. Just to layer it out. So the next sound is this. Again, nothing too crazy. I just took a preset, tweaked it to the point I like, and then filtering. A lot of filtering actually. If you look at the automation, it just automates all the time throughout the whole track. Same for the next sound. They kind of like in call and response sort of or question and answer sort of pattern. They kind of interact with each other a little bit. So this is again a preset that I've tweaked in the processing. This is the EQ for that. This is some notes, nothing too crazy, only 2 notes. Same here. They're just playing little melody, but just split across 2 synths. Then onto vocal. Simple vocal processing as well, nothing too crazy, not even like compression, because this sample's probably been compressed quite a lot, as you can tell by the look of this waveform. So a little bit of auto-tune, probably doesn't even need it, to be honest with you, but I've just put it there for the sake of like effect. Yeah, just cut a little bit of rumble. Cut a little bit of rumble there, and that's it. So moving on to a high frequencies, which is my percussions essentially. This is how it sounds all together, and then that's my clap. I've made it in Serum, and it's essentially just a white noise being modulated by envelopes, and built-in EQ in Serum being modulated by a sharp attack envelope. So quite easy to make, but the key is in processing. Basically that's how it sounds without any processing. Quite flappy, not so much of a clap. Then you add saturation, and then this thing just does magic. Drum bass, like it a lot. You just crank up a transient and it brings out all the goodness. Then just literally laid percussions on top of the clap. Congos. One of the things I like to use is using this rack. What I'm usually doing is I'm dragging the samples in that I like, and then as I'm playing the track, I'm swapping samples very quickly. You just take one pad, drag it across the first pad where you got MIDI information, and then it swaps the sample. And that way I can easily and quickly pre-listen and choose the sample that really fits. So another thing I quite like is this adding this randomizer for the MIDI. So this is only set to very small amount, so the randomization occurring is very, very subtle. You probably won't even hear it, but I think when you producing electronic music, it's vital to have some sort of like human feel to your programming. Same with bongos, yeah, pretty much just adding a bit of transient attack. that whole group just gets filtered out. As you can see, I'm a big fan of grouping similar frequencies into a group and then processing it separately to like glue things together. Here is the rare case where I would use a sample loop. I use samples for vocals and hits, one shots, but I very rarely use loops. In this case, this fit, so I left it there. So here is another sound, another hi-hat, 16th. Loads of percussions being layered on top. Big fan of this shaper box to add movement. This just pans from left to right. Also kind of volume ducking a little bit, around 50% dry wet. Next thing is hi-hats. Yeah, just layered 3 different hi-hats on top of each other. A little bit of transit master. Not much processing, to be honest. The key here is to choose sounds wisely. Big fan of this widener. Apparently it's mono compatible. Yeah, I checked it. It kind of is mono compatible when you bounce everything to mono. Right. And then that's the percussions. Moving on to effects section. First in a row is this Vox Rev, which stands for vocal reverb. Very easy to make. You can probably make one now. You just grab a piece of vocal that you like. I'm just gonna use this one for example. And you grab your reverb, tweak settings or use a preset, whatever you like. I use this preset. Crank up the decay, get rid of pre-delay, make sure dry wet is 100%, and then just play it back, but also record it. So solo that sample. And then what I usually have is a track in my project that called resampled. Very easy to set up. You just create audio track, and in this breakdown menu just select resampling. So whatever you're gonna play now, and if you arm this track and hit record, we'll resample to this track. So So you just record like that. Get rid of reverb. Then adjust your length. Reverse. Adjust the fade. There you go. This is your riser. You can make it out of literally any sound. I usually try and create as many effects from the sounds that I already have in the project. So that way I feel like they just sound more organic, more like they belong to the project. So this is literally a vocal sample being reverbed and reversed. Then snare fill, quite basic stuff. Not much processing to that, little bit of transit master. More snares. They even play same sort of pattern as them ones. Just different snare sample. Lasers. Again, very easy to make. just use a sine wave and modulate it with an envelope, with LFO on the 16th, modulate the pitch, coarse pitch. And then to create this rise effect, you take another LFO and drop it onto a level, and then modulate level throughout the time. And another effect is this swoosh sound. This is a preset. So this is quite cool. This is a snare roll. It's just a snare sample, and then it goes through the overdrive plugin and then a little bit of compression, and then it gets in this hyper build-up effects I've put together. So this is basically a rack that contains two different chains, and one chain I called it dry and one chain I called it wet, and I've dragged this little guy to fade in and out. So as you gradually increase this, sound from dry chain will go onto a wet chain. This would be like 50% dry wet. You put absolutely no processing on a dry channel. On wet you put this vocoder with a noise modulator, and everything that goes through that modulator basically becomes noise. You can run any sample through it and then select release. That's very important. You have to select release. If you're not gonna give it enough release, won't sound like a build-up. So this is quite cool to make, and then use it on any sounds that you want to make a build-up off of. The next sound is cymbal, reverse cymbal. I just used it straight away. Sometimes it's very easy to just drag in sounds, presets, samples, and just leave them. They just work. Another lasers. Then the noise impact. Very simple, easy to make. You just select the noise oscillator, two voices apart, take the retrig off to make them kind of wider, and yeah, just a small little note there. Another riser from a preset pack. Eight-bar riser, again from some presets, nothing too fancy there. This snare, reversed snare samples, and hat impact. It's made the same way I showed you how to make risers from the vocal. Yeah, you just run it through the reverb, resample it. This was a snare that I've run through the reverb, and this was the hat. And then the last thing is this noise. You probably can't even hear it in the context of the track, but I feel like it adds that warmth and kind of gluing pad to the whole track. And that's it for the track, really. Typical way I would process the track would be to group all the groups together. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of grouping stuff. So I would have like 4 groups, sometimes more, sometimes less. And then I would group them all together again into a pre-master. chain and I would like compress stuff. A little bit of glue, compressor, and a little bit of OTT multiband compression, around 40% dry wet. Then all this thing would go into a master chain, which is in this case very simple. I'm just cutting lows and highs. Then I'm using this EQ to get rid of the muddiness around 300 Hertz, and also to add a little bit of air around 12K. That changes the sound quite drastically. I mean, to someone it probably is subtle, but I feel like it cleans up quite a lot of that mud in the mid frequencies. Yeah, and then the last plugin in the chain is this Ozone Maximizer. That just brings out all the power that's in there. And this is it. This is the track. Nothing too complicated about this track. Feel free to ask me any questions if you want me to explain anything in more depth or anything like that, or anything really. Just drop a comment. I'll be happy to help. Hope this was helpful though, and yeah, see you next time. Peace.